My name is Alex Amini. It's creating the condition in which something might happen. And I suppose that would be ideally what life should be. It's a shift in being, I suppose, is what happens, and that's what you're waiting for. And sometimes it comes in the work, and sometimes it doesn't. My parents met in Stuttgart. My father was studying there, and my mother was learning the language. She's Italian, he's Iranian. They met and they magically fell in love, and they got married, and they stayed there for a few years, and then they went to Iran. We were all there until the revolution. That would be 79. They went back to Italy. My brother and I, we did go to boarding school in Switzerland, American boarding school in Lugano. And from there, he went off to his route, and I went to another boarding school in California. To my surprise, an all-boys boarding school. Very nice, but shocking at first. I guess it was the hostage crisis. Being identified as a terrorist nation, automatically it's a threat. You are a threat. So you withdraw. You have to withdraw. You can. That seems to be the best strategy. I went to Pratt Institute, the School of Architecture. Somehow the mix of art and architecture and music and culture was there in the very beginning. The kind of scene in New York, the nightclubs, it was beautiful to go to these places where it was quite a theater, and you could really bend your identity, I suppose, and it was so bent that nobody knew how to place you, and it's so mixed that this whole idea of categorizing and typecasting is no longer functional. It can no longer be applied in New York. At Pratt, then later at Cooper, the influence of art was very much stressed, and that's what made it worth pursuing, because this promise that you have a kind of a systemic way of dealing with art and maybe needing something to hold on to was nice. The feeling of having to work to pay the rent for the studio didn't really make sense. By the end of the day, I didn't really want to come to the studio. So the solution presented itself to go to Italy, where my father had a carpet store. He was having issues with his partner, and I said, okay, I'll step in. I took over the store, and I said, under one condition, that the back of the store is my studio. So this was like a perfect combination. You sit there and you wait, but in the meanwhile, you go do your paintings, and then I must say also just the overwhelming quality of just they take over you. I mean, the bigger the better. I mean, it's like a sea. It's just so rich. And there's something about weaving what's above and what's behind, I suppose, and every thread bears witness to that. And every knot is, I guess, the intention to resist. So, I mean, when this thing cools, it kind of forms a skin on top. So it's nice to just keep it. It's going to be difficult to pour without splattering. We all participate in a mass trance. And somehow, to get to true being, we all have to do homework. We have to wish to. We have to wish to become our true being. You could look at these paintings as potentially the false self, trying to create an armor, trying to manifest something, to be worthy of inclusion, I suppose, or exchange. And at some point, the true self has to come in. It comes in, but it could really take it or leave it. At some points, it could very much also question the whole validity of doing things like this. It could be a distraction. It could be a pleasure-seeking mechanism, which is a way of filling the void. There are moments where magic comes, and then there's moments where the pendulum swings to the other side and you feel empty, and it just seems absurd. It just seems like you're really beating yourself for nothing, no? You're trying to make magic happen, but it's strange how when you demand it, it disappears. But like with so many things, it's like what's the term? It's grace, you know? I mean, when good things happen, it's grace. It's not my doing. I just show up, and then sometimes good things happen, and sometimes it just really does not. Here, what's happening is this is cornstarch that you get from the supermarket. You leave it on there, that's a puddle. It cracked, and the dye was poured, and it seeped through the cracks. And here, this is a similar pour that we did there, except I let the cornstarch dry. You know, it's going, and you're synchronized, and your body feels it. I don't know how much the thinking is in there, but you know, at some point you're dancing, I guess. Whoa, that could have stopped. You see, I mean, there's like several layers, but we're gonna go all the way just to see. This idea of manufacturing of sorts, I guess that comes from architecture, in which you're kind of making something, but not piece by piece. It's kind of like elements come together and they're generated, almost like a magnetic field, or you know, like some kind of natural force lines which automatically produce something. And it's not like putting it piece by piece together, but there's a confluence, and it makes things generate and come into being, come into formation. So we're talking about the difference between these two types of paintings. Fundamentally, that this was produced on the table, and given the dimensions of the table, it's done in sections. You wet the whole thing, and it adheres to the surface, so it becomes smooth, and your cup doesn't lift the fabric. So it becomes kind of like attached, and it creates kind of a permanent field because everything is wet. So as the paint is introduced from the top, it begins to interact with the underneath surface. And so this is a new kind of body of work that's going to generate potentially. What's new is we have the ground instead of the table. I work on the whole thing, and I've found a way to make it padded enough to where the roughness of the ground doesn't hurt it. The whole thing has to get wetted so it adheres to the ground, right? And then I'm experimenting with other layers on top to see if there's a transference of information from one painting to the other. Ideally, you will have so many traces that slowly build up a kind of a self-manifestation of sorts. It's miraculous if you can do it. You're going to do it not because other people have to like it, or because it has to be this or that. You're going to do it because you don't know what else to do. You're going to do it because you might discover something. You have to go into it thinking that you could fail completely. And at times it really feels that way. At times it feels like a burden. I mean, it would be really nice just to be able to let it all go and start with a clean slate, you know, and not have this ballast of material and weight. I mean, it's a dilemma. The work is a way of being, a way of relating to things. So you work because it teaches you something. It's the most direct way of being with the elements of life without the restraint of purpose. You can sense something might happen if only you have enough patience. What we're trying to do in painting is how to practice being open. But the main event is always what happens, and you almost have nothing to do with it. I like this idea of everything coming back and referring to the self. Everything that refers to the self is valid. Everything that is a reference to the outside is always a decoy, right? Because you always have to come back to you. But I suppose there's something that in all of us needs to engage. It's kind of like a mixing of rainwater with earth. We benefit from engaging and from being one with everybody. Over here, you're beginning to see some kind of a pattern that is developing, right? Some of these droplets are not quite regulated. They begin to have a natural feel to them. They begin to be like foliage or something. So there's 3 repetitions, one above, one below, and just from the sense of rolling it backwards and forwards several times. So that's what I was trying to do by rolling the canvas back and forth. So this is a sunscreen, and as soon as I saw it, I knew immediately that this would create a nice filter for having the paint come through a little less abundantly. Hopefully. When you take the cup and you flip it on there, pneumatic pressure will hold the liquid in, and the canvas being unprimed resists the liquid from spilling and going. There's a natural process there. Also a new piece just discovered yesterday. 2 pieces that actually fit together. I guess it's this idea of some kind of a ready-made object that you can work with. Instead of having to, question every mark, you have a couple of things and you just play with it. It's like a game of pool. It could be a game of ping pong. Whatever you want to associate it with, that's all fine. It can come and go. I guess what remains is fascination. So my bag of tricks is to move the cups around, but really what's happening is the interaction of the surface, the fabric, the tension, the suction of the water, the accidents, what penetrates through and what doesn't. The real artist is the chance, the nature that always brings its own magical appearance and disappearance. The intention is to keep the ball rolling so that something might happen. What gets in the way is what? Inhibition, right? Of so this should be meaningful, I should do something that's significant, right? And this is not the case. In this case, we're just trying to allow things to happen. The domain of painting, I think, is the idea of recording, which it could borrow from tape recorders, video recorders, cameras. So the canvas becomes a site in which a kind of recording takes place. You could say that phenomena, events, some kind of a manifestation takes place, and this becomes a recording device. Not like a photograph, not like a photogram, but something that gets impregnated with essence, maybe.